the function.
All right, so before you guys even get to this step, like a lot of people start letting samples. I suggest getting everything organized, whether it's like techno, tech house, house, disco, get everything organized. And then you're going to go down right over here where it says folder and you add your sample folder. That's going to take a lot of time from just going through and digging through folders without like
I can
having
and
any
I can
idea.
show real quick just how you guys see how I have that set up. So if you guys take a look down here in the bottom left, I got samples. I actually selected add folder. I went to Ableton projects and I have a sample folder that I've actually created over time depending on the kind of genre that I want to use. So this is something that I've set up. So for instance, house and techno is pretty much all the sample folders and sounds that I have. Now this doesn't include VSTs or plugins. This is just sounds. This doesn't include the native sounds that Ableton gives you either. That's in a separate folder within the Ableton program itself. But I pretty much use this Ableton projects folder for any kind of pack that I download from Ableton, any kind of sample pack. VSTs are installed somewhere within the user library. You don't really have to worry about organizing a VST. A VST, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, when I mention that, that's a plugin you download from a third-party developer or a program beside Ableton Live. All right, cool. So if you guys take a look, I'm gonna just collapse all these so you can see them. And I have my name pretty generically. That's just how I like to name what I have. Now, everything you're seeing on the left-hand side here, these are all different sounds. These either come from the sample folder that we were talking about originally. And you probably, I mean, some people might be asking, how are we getting these here originally to begin with? Now I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna insert an audio track. I usually work off of audio tracks.
Hey Mitch, what's the shortcut for that to do that real quick?
Command T is on Mac. So, but if you right click too, it shows you those shortcuts and that's gonna help your workflow a ton.
Yeah, learn your shortcuts because literally will save you 5 minutes. Shortcut.
I think shortcuts are great. I think shortcuts help me out a lot. Getting my workflow fast, especially in the early stages of just building a pattern in general. Now, one thing that I want to say real quick too, before we talk about the difference between an audio clip and a MIDI clip is it is really up to you. I started out creating MIDI drums when I first started producing. So I would insert a kick into a MIDI rack and then I would punch in the notes similar to like you would see on like a drum.
We'll also show you how to do that too. There's two different ways you can do. You can add a MIDI track, which is Command Shift T. Right, and then you can go and add over here in drums. You can hit a drum rack. They also have drum racks already made for you if you want to have like a 909 or 808. If you want to make your own drum rack, you just double click on the drum rack and it will pop up in your MIDI. And then you would go to your samples. And then you would add them individually. And all you have to do is literally just drag it in and it's there. And if you don't have a keyboard or a beat pad, you can use your keyboard to play them out. If you go up here to the right, top right, there's a little keyboard. You click it, and now you can play your keyboard. So let's find it. That's just me hitting A on my keyboard. You can do this all your drums, and then you would add a MIDI. Select the area. Command M. Command Shift M. You get your MIDI. And then you can add your shots by double clicking. So
and then that's called adding a MIDI cell. So depending on the length of the cell, and then that line's gonna go all the way until probably 16, 17 bars all the way out because that's the length that you actually created that.
Right.
And then you could loop that too. What if you wanted to do like an audio track versus the MIDI and insert that clap as well?
So I usually don't do it that way unless I'm trying to make hats, like my own hats and my own rhythm pattern with hats, but I usually just use audio. So this is what you're going to do. So let's delete all this stuff except for the Anna. The first thing I actually do after I find a kick is figure out what key I'm going to be in. So I would literally go to Google and you can type in F major scale and it'll pull up. Because I don't know it off the top of my head. I don't think unless you instrument you really know. But You know, then you just know F is a no, and then A is a. So if you want your kick to be an F and you want your bass to be an A, so they're not in the same frequencies. If they're in the same frequencies, it's going to be too muddy, and you can do that with any scale. So let's go down here and have a folder. So there's my kick. You literally just grab it and you can drag it in. Just drag it in there. All right, so that's a loop. Sometimes you get a one shot.
How'd you cut
drop.
that? How'd you
I cut that. So you highlight the area, or you can just get the cursor and select the little area that you want it. And Command E is to cut. So you just click the area and Command E cuts it.
I think right click and then you could cut it, but definitely try to use those. I think, okay, so Megan asked a question to confirm. You said it sounds muddy to you if your kick and your sub bass are the same frequency.
Right. So you want to have like, figure out what key you're in first, and then like say your bass is going to be an A, then your kick is going to be an F. So that they're in the same scale. It's just one's a first and one's a third in the scale.
And then also on top of that, when we're talking about frequencies too, that's not even including how you're gonna act if you do EQ.
Okay, so where do you see the frequency of the kick? So you can do this by, there's an EQ right here. If you double click, you can see the frequency of the actual kick. Watch.
What EQ is that?
This is EQ8, which you can also find in MIDI effects on the right side.
Or audio effects.
Or audio effects, and it's right here. All you really have to do is click and it's added. To get this up there bigger, you double click right here, and it comes up. You can see it's hitting right here. If you wanted to go an extra step, where is it?
What is that, like 70?
Yeah, if you want to go the extra step, this is free. Box of Vango, it's like and it'll tell you exactly where it's at. Let me make a loop real quick.
Voxengo.
Command D, duplicate. Highlight the area. Command J is consolidate. So it'll take whatever you selected and it'll consolidate it to one loop. You can double click. On the bottom left, there's a loop button. When you hit that, you literally could just loop the kick for as long as you want. Now, I suggest when you start off and making a beat, make a 16-bar loop and just start making it, like putting stuff in. You know, you just have to go through the process of finding your sounds. Once you figure it out, oh, shit. Just drag and drop.
One thing too, I do want to say real quick is a lot of the times what we're doing right now is just building a rhythm, kind of getting the track going, building from the bottom up. As far as like where you want to start with sound is up to you. So like depending on what kind of music you're into, You can always I highly suggest listen to reference tracks. You can even drag and drop a track into Ableton Live and match it up with the track that you're working on as a reference track. Ableton's really user-friendly as far as dragging in whatever sounds that you want to. So a lot of us, if you listen to our music, a lot of us are really into tech house, different kinds of house music. So on the top left corner, Ableton Susio is working in 124. A lot of the times when we DJ sets, it's usually around 124, 126. So this is kind of like your 4 to the floor, hi-hat on every end, clap on the 2 and the 4.
Also, too, if you want to change the BPM, it's up here in the top. You just type it in, 25. So making a beat like a bass, if you don't know how to play a keyboard or anything, that's what you can do.
It's pretty similar to Massive PD, but it's just a little bit different.
Pretty similar. Let's do this one. Command Shift M, and then you can literally where you want it to be. Shift down arrow will have you go from different octaves without having to tap 12 times down, because 12 up and 12 down is different octaves. 12 up is an octave up, 12 down is an octave down. So you can hit, if you hold shift and the down key, it'll automatically go down an octave for you. So yeah, so you just click it in. And you can make your beats that way easily.
Is that what kind of bass is that? Is that all from Anna?
This is all from Anna. This is
so a lot of if you have Ableton, if you don't have to use Anna. You can use samples like we're talking about here, like in these sample packs. You can do one stab bass hits. Ableton comes with its own operator.
is it's really good. I used to use it on everything, and I still use it on many tracks.
I think operator comes in the advanced version though now. It doesn't just come in every version of Ableton, so make sure you get the advanced version. Yeah.
It's just all it is just a regular synthesizer, and you can change it from sine wave to saw wave to square wave and so on and so forth.
Angel Mendoza posted a question pretty much saying my laptop is a little older, so when I run Spectrum Analyzer it freezes. So I use Ableton Spectrum. Just some info if anybody else has the issue. I use Operator a lot as well. It's dope. Like processor probably might be the only reason it's freezing, just because it's a little bit older.
Yeah, I mean that I have like a 2012 MacBook Pro that I still use. That's actually what's recording the video. What I did is I cleared the whole thing out. It started from brand new, put everything on a hard drive, and it works pretty well. But sometimes you got to get a new computer. It took me like almost 9 years to get one, but
yeah.
Do you want to take over the screen, Mitch?
Yeah, that's cool. We can do that. So I'll jump back into that track. So pretty much what I got going on here, guys, is a built-out track. This came out on Music is for Lovers a little while ago, actually. It wasn't too long ago. So a lot of the times we're talking about dragging and dropping sounds in here. And I'll play this for you guys just so you get kind of an idea what this sounds like. Might be a little loud. I don't know if you need to turn it down. You're working so hard, but only time will tell. So pretty much what we got here is not too many audio tracks. I mean, we're looking at maybe like 15 to 20 different audio tracks and things going on in the track itself. So pretty much, if you look at the very top, I have this cool thing called SC. This is a sidechain. So a lot of the times in tracks, what we really like to get is kind of a hard thumping, kind of throw your hands in the air, pulsing sound, and especially out of your bass. So what I have here is I have a bass sample that has pretty much been sliced and diced 5 different times. If you take a look, the notes are pretty dang similar. I'm gonna solo this so you guys can hear it. And then that's on top of this like stabby kind of bassy, stabby thing, and so pretty much what I usually do as a trick, and this is kind of just if you have your track built out, and I'm not even really going to talk about it too much, but I just want to explain what this is at the top because it says SC. This allows my track to have a kick drum pretty much running the entire time when my other kick drum isn't playing. So if I want to still get on this bass a kind of effect that there is a kick drum playing, I can use Kickstart, which is a plugin, or I can use this sidechain effect at the top. And we can also talk about that a little bit later. It pertains to the track a little bit. All these are pretty much audio tracks. The way you could tell that is I don't have a MIDI cell. So I don't have one of these here, which is that bar with that blank space and the little dots. You can tell these are all audio tracks because they're actual waveforms. Some of these are not grouped. Nothing's actually grouped in this. Grouped, sometimes people will select multiple instruments together at the same time and group them into one bus, like a drum bus or a bass bus, and run one effect for everything. Let's talk about some stuff. Does anybody have any questions so far also, by the way?
Yeah, so there's Sam White says, is there a reason you guys work directly with the audio samples versus programming with MIDI?
I think audio sounds better.
Yeah, and honestly, at the end of the day, when I do use MIDI to program, like I would never use MIDI to program my kick. I'll just literally just throw the kick in there audio-wise. But as hats, if I'm doing that way, I'll still render down the MIDI in audio just because it'll sound better. I personally, in my opinion.
A lot of the times too, I've noticed when I'm in MIDI, and I'll kind of show this as an example real quick. So say for instance, if I made a new,
and also for Hash D Brown, the bass, so the bass you have the compressor sidechain to, yeah, so we'll show you how to do that. You put the compressor on the bass and you would send it to the sidechain. What the sidechain is doing, it's sending a signal, and then when you send that signal to your bass, it's gonna have it pump in and out.
all right, pretty much what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to just actually make this audio track. So pretty much what I did is I just made a blank audio track. I have this EQ8 saved. So pretty much what I did is originally when I first started producing, I was always dragging in these EQ8s. I thought I was like, oh my gosh, every single time. So what you can actually do is if this was blank and you made a new audio track, if you create an audio track and I go to audio instruments and drag in EQ8 or a compressor or whatever effect I use regularly, you can then right click and save this audio track as a default. So anytime you create a new one, that's always going to be or have that audio effect.
Also, click the top of the EQ8.
Yeah.
And choose at the very bottom, should say oversampling.
Yeah, oversampling will help for sure with audio processing.
That your EQ is on oversampling. Make it sound 10 times better.
I haven't looked too much into the definition of oversampling. I usually like to speak as to why I use something like that. I got to look into oversampling a little bit more, but I noticed a difference for sure when I started turning oversampling on. Sounds more precise. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to just rename this kick, and I'm going to go into samples. I'm going to just go grab a kick drum real quick and drag and drop this in here for you guys.
Also, if anyone needs samples, if you're just starting out, let me know. I can hook you guys up.
We'll just do this one. It's chill. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop that in, and obviously I'm going to try to make this as precise as I possibly can. And then from here, I'm going to collect that new group. I hit Command J for that, or right click and consolidate. but you'll see the hotkey for that is Command J. I'm going to turn loop on for that kick drum, and I'm going to just drag that out a little bit for you guys. And then from here, we'll go in, and I'll just duplicate that real quick, and I'm going to rename one of those SC for sidechain. And then I'm going to mute that sidechain because we don't need to hear it. We're just using it as a clone, as an imitation. And then what I'm going to do real quick, and we'll pick a bass drum, whatever. Actually, I'm going to get something kind of wobbly. I like that. That's whack. Where's that? That's the sorry. That's cool.
All right, so to duplicate, it's Command D. So you select the area and then you hit Command D as
there's a bunch. Sorry. Oh yeah, there's all your sample people. Have fun with that. I'll try to upload some stuff to. I'll try to upload some. Go ahead.
What we'll do is at the end of this, me and Mitch will gather like a couple of our favorite sample packs and we'll put them together and we'll send them all to all you guys with the emails.
So I'm gonna just use this bass. I'm going to put this bass also, if you double click right here at the top where it says baseline or on the bar, the orange bar, you double click, that shows you the waveform. I'm going to put this in complex. The difference between beats and complex is how the waveform plays. So beats sounds like beats. It's more quantized, it's more to grid, it's more snapping to grid. So I usually keep drums on beats, claps, hi-hats, kick drums. Waveforms that I want to sound more natural or different kind of loops or sounds or synths, I usually put on complex. What I'm going to do then too is I'm going to loop this bass just so we can kind of show an example of sidechain. I'm going to double click bass, and then I'm going to go to Ableton's audio effects, and then I'm going to go to the compressor. This I have also saved as a preset. Compressor doesn't look like this if you just load it in natively in default. So what I did is I automatically have the threshold saved to -6. Sidechain's already turned on, and the ratio is at infinite. And then what I did is I right-clicked on compressor, and I saved even the compressor as a default. EQ8 also doesn't look like this. I have 30 hertz rounded off and 16K rounded off.
And why do you do that, Mitch? Why do you round it out 30
Why
hertz?
do I round that off is usually because most of the sounds that I like produce at, or what I usually use to produce in mono for the kind of tech house and house music that I make, is most of the sounds below 30 hertz and above 16,000 hertz. We don't hear on big sound systems. You don't hear it on streaming platforms, your phone. Mono usually is where if you play your music on a sound system or on a speaker, you can actually hear it out of both speakers evenly, and it sounds very clean without any kind of distortion. You can check mono just by putting utility on the master chain of your track, and if you turn it off and on, that'll check it to see if your track's in mono, and that's very important. A lot of producers or a lot of record labels or a lot of people that sign tracks will usually use that right off the bat and check and see if your track's even in mono to begin with.
And the reason why you want it in mono is because when you play at different clubs, most of the sound systems are in mono, and it sounds better. Also, another thing to have in mono is your bass. Not all your bass, not every single bass needs to be in mono, but majority of the time, the bass you put bass in mono.
So sidechain, do you put all tracks in mono or just output master? I put bass in mono. So pretty much Ableton has this, Ableton 10 has this really cool utility, under utility, audio effects, utility, bass mono. And I'll drag and drop that in before EQ8 at the beginning of the chain. And that'll automatically put my bass here into mono, so I don't even have to worry about it. I don't put my kick in mono anymore because usually most of the time I've noticed those samples already come in mono like that, so you don't really have to. So I'm going to go back to this sidechain real quick. If we're not using VSTs or third-party plugins like Nicky Romero's Kickstart, I'm going to just use the native audio compressor in Ableton. So audio effects, compressor. I did not use a drop-down. I just kind of double-clicked compressor here, and that loaded in my preset that I had saved. from there, I'm going to actually select that SC, that sidechain, ghost sidechain kick that I created at the top of my track. And let's see what it sounds like with it off, or hear what it sounds like. I'm going to also turn the threshold up to -12. So if you guys don't see that, that was -6. That's at 12. So let's hear it before. Let's turn that up a little bit. And now we're going to hear it on. Let's turn that up a little bit more. So it gives it a little bit more of a duck. Where that
if you have headphones on, you should be able to hear it pumping a little more.
Or on your monitors or your sub.
Oh yeah, your monitor.
I'm gonna take that off. You can see the GR right there actually ducking every time that kick hits on a 1, 2, 3, 4. And then from here, I'm gonna let that play and I'm gonna loop this. We're gonna rename this clap, and I'm gonna go back to these samples real quick and see. Clap.
Sounds like something's off.
You think it is? Is it the kick?
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, the kick's a little off. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna quantize this. So what I did real quick, because it sounds like the kick's a little off, I'm gonna double click this audio waveform at the top right here, this kick loop. And I'm gonna go to the very beginning, and you can see these arrows right here, these markings. I'm gonna drag that and just snap that and double click that into place. That one and that one. You can always right click and select quantize. I just wanted to double check. That sound better?
Yeah.
What I'm gonna do too is I'm gonna EQ this down a little bit. Like obviously there's like no need for this area of sound. There's nothing playing here. So I'm gonna just round that off at like 250 hertz. There's just nothing there. So we're gonna just give ourselves a little bit of room. I usually suggest EQing pretty much any sound within Ableton. It's up to you. If you don't think it's, however you want to sculpt your sound is up to you in Ableton. But a lot of the times the reason I use these EQ8s is to give other sounds as I bring them in room to breathe. So even though we're not hearing any sound here, I'm gonna cut off any of these frequencies that you might see around 1K, 800 hertz to give any other kind of frequency we're going to breathe.
Show them how you can see the hertz on the EQ8.
What do you mean?
If you go to the point and highlighted it, it'll tell you like on the side.
That blue box right there too, with your cursor in the bottom left as you're hovering over it, gives you like an in-moment kind of read of what hertz you're actually at as you drag your cursor, and I think that's great.
And then if you also see, it'll tell you what key as well. So it says D3, so that's D, and then that's like the third octave up.
Yep. And then also too, if you want to solo any of this, there's these little headphones right here. If you turn those on and then press and hold this blue, like any of these, and kind of drag that up and listen to the frequency, that'll kind of give you a better, if you want to hear a certain kind of sound a little bit better solo, you could always do that. That's kind of I didn't really know about that for a while. Does anybody have any questions at all? If you do, type them in chat.
He said, Kyle said hold shift.
No, you just, your cursor, click, hold, press and click on that little, so headphones on, those little arrows up, press and click on that little circle, and it'll just
drag it,
and it'll hold it.
This frequency will help you out to figure out what your kick is in, what key it's in, what frequencies your like every track is at, your perks, your hi-hats, because you want them to be in the same key, hitting at different frequencies.
So let's get like a cool. That's a cool clap. Cool. First try. Awesome.
Woo.
So we're gonna just loop this clap. Looks good. Waveform looks like it's kind of snapped to grid. I'm gonna open up another audio track too. If you guys take a look at the right-hand side, these are all also loading in at -6 in the volume here. That's also something that I have automatically saved. This is for mix down purposes, just because when I'm producing, I kind of mix as I go. So mix down is huge.
Start your track -6.
Yeah.
help you out in the long.
Less volume, you'll thank yourself later. And that's a bit too hot already off the bat. So I'm going to go down to like -9, -10 on that clap. Clap, that's a drum. I'm going to leave that in beats. I'm not going to change that to complex, kind of like we talked about earlier. I don't know, man. That's like kind of just building like a generic groove. This is 120 BPM. I'll go to like 125. Let's go chat. If you have your kick at -6, where do you usually sit your bass? So like my kick is definitely not going to end up at -6. I'll tell you that right now. It's probably going to end up.
It's all like relative to on like how loud your bass and kick are. Like,
so I can tell you one thing.
You want them to dance each other. You want your kick. Your kick is obviously one of the loudest things in your mix, right? Because that's the heartbeat. That's what's pumping the track. Your vocals, and then your bass needs to sit right where it's dancing with your kick, not as loud, just right. So
I would right now with this, if you guys are hearing this, and I am sharing the direct audio through, if my kick with that sidechain, that clap is still pretty hot too. So I'm probably gonna like turn the kick up to -9. But then what I'm also gonna do is I'm also gonna probably throw the glue compressor on the kick and turn the threshold to -6. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna compress the kick. It's almost like a limiter, but it's not a limiter. It's a compressor, so it's not necessarily compressing volume. It's compressing peaks. That helps out a lot. Sit the kick or sit the sound in the mix. So what I did is I just double-clicked on glue compressor under Ableton effects, and I turned the threshold up gradually. And if you see the meter, as I turn the threshold up, increases. It goes further and further to 5 or 10 or 15. I usually don't go past 5.
Mitch, what's the difference between glue compressor and regular compressor?
Glue compressor and regular compressor is usually just the user interface, but the glue compressor is usually used a little bit more for limiting than the compressor is used for side chaining. Even though they both have side chain, if you drag out this here, this looks identical to the side chain in.
I like using glue compressors on buses, so I would group all my hats together and then throw an EQ and a glue compressor on there, so that way it kind of does what it says. It kind of glues everything together, makes it a little cohesive.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna send you guys a link real quick if I can find it. Ableton has the most insane just the most insane website for definitions of everything there. And if you guys haven't been on there yet, I would highly suggest just going to Ableton's website, and there's literally a definition, and you could just type in like glue compressor and it'll take you directly to the reference manual for that definition of what that is. And sometimes I've noticed looking up those definitions, the only thing that kind of sucks is a lot of that vocabulary you might not know or you might not understand. So you'll read the definition and you're like, oh, cool, I know what it means, but I don't know what the fuck it means because of that. So I kind of just try to explain it in the best way possible that I can get you guys to understand it. Do you suggest mainly?
All right, so Ryan has a question. He says, do you suggest mainly EQing on buses for sound groups or individual tracks and buses?
Both.
I EQ on every single track. Oh, and then the gain on samples.
That's
if the sample was really low.
Like this bass is really low. You know what I mean? So yeah,
you could turn it up.
I could probably turn it up to like 3. And that's in this bottom left, right below where you switch between beats and complex.
There's also other ways you can do that too. You can do that by compressing it, and that will bring it up a little bit, and then also put a limiter on there. But you don't want to do too much.
Okay, cool. So this is very early stages of this track. So we got a kick, clap, perk loop, synth lead, stab, bass. So if you take a look right here in the bass, we have our mono. EQ is already set up. These little red dots you guys are going to see, this is automation. So if you guys take a look, you'll see some of these lines that we have are drawn in different places to fade things in and out of the track. We haven't even dove into automation yet, but I'll play this for you guys real quick to see.
Also, if you
sorry, that was loud.
if Ableton 10 and you don't know how to get automation, you hit A on your keyboard and it will pop up.
Unless you have the keyboard on. I was gonna say that
true.
earlier when you were using your keyboard. That's a pain right there, dude. It took me like a day and a half to figure that out.
So if the keyword's highlighted, it's on. You won't be able to use your keys.
All right, I'm gonna play this. This bass is like a 4-bar. I just chopped this up. It kind of like repeats itself. These notes were originally over here, so I just kind of dragged and dropped and smushed some things. Looped it. It's on complex. I have this EQ'd, this build right here. This is like 75 hertz. So if you take a look in the intro, so that's a gradual rise. My buddy Delos too just gave me a really cool tip. In the bottom left corner of this arrow, guys, if you uncollapse this tool tips, I believe this default is on, but this left arrow tool tips right there. I'm pretty sure that's what he was talking about at least. This EQ line right here, you double click bass and you look at my EQ8, you can see the line moving in real time because I drew that automation. So I'm doing like a gradual rise, taking the low end off of the bass before it goes into the actual drop itself. It's just kind of giving it more of like tension, more, so these are kind of those little things when maybe you guys are thinking like, oh man, how do I get my track to sound like this? Or how do I get this part to kind of be different instead of just not doing that or just going straight into it, not doing little 1-bar segment cutouts that change up the entire track or the way it feels going into the build. So we'll listen to that little rise for that EQ8. And if you have any questions about like how to set up that EQ, I can also show you that. But pretty much all I did is I turned A on, I pressed 1 because I knew I wanted to control this wave. And then I know I'm dragging and I'm controlling the frequency. And it's kind of funny, if I hit 2 and hit frequency, you can see that bar changes, that red changes. So if I go back to 1 and hit frequency, it should snap back to where I was actually drawing. So we'll... That's just that synth stab. This is another drawing for a delay. Right here, so this is kind of on. This one was off. I definitely have the bass sidechained right here. This bass is sidechained with the native compressor in Ableton to the sidechain that I already have created at the top. And you can see that drawn out. It's just off like we originally talked about. It's at -12 on the threshold. I would probably even put Kickstart on it, but that's a third-party plugin. I wasn't gonna dive too much into third-party plugins. That's another sidechain. It's 15 bucks online. Comes in really handy. I like it. So, and then again, with like some of these like red lines and some of this indication that I have, this is just building and drawing out some of the EQing that we have for, so this bass down here on the bottom, if you guys take a look, the only automation I have is really just the low end itself. You can see the side chains cranking on the bass. I think I even have the synth lead side chained. Kickstart's on. So that's off. That's on. You can hear the ducking tremendously actually in this synth lead. That's a really good example.
Hey Mitch.
What's up, dude?
So we got The question: what's some of your favorite parameters to automate, and for what purpose?
Parameters as in like frequencies or
Yeah, or just like what are you? Yeah, so like what are you automating? You're automating the frequency right now for the
what are your
kick,
favorite parameters on me and for what purpose?
or
Anything.
just anything.
I kind of resorted to EQ8 to pretty much do a lot of the cutting in and out of like low end frequencies and high end frequencies. I used to use auto filter, and I actually kind of started using it again, but I don't as much nearly as I used to. But for instance, like with this perk loop, you could see EQ8 just cutting out that low end, and then it does the classic build back up. And then I kind of have it snap in certain places. So instead of doing like a gradual build again, these are some of those parts where like, this is the build, so you're going to want it to come back in full steam right at 16,000 hertz. So that's that top round off that I have. That just snap. I love like delay. So this is in this synth stab. I have the delay set up for the dry wet off and on here. And that's just kind of for like delay. You can hear that drawn out. That's 35% on the delay versus. The reverb's on, so that gives it a little bit more of that ring out. That's off. That reverb I have set up as a default also. Low cut, high cut, that's just pretty much the frequencies that I'm using the waveform in or the reverb in. Dry wet I usually use pretty low on the reverb. Reverb is an effect that's in Ableton also, it's native.
Hey, Mitch, so Kyle has a question. It says, your kicks are super thumps. What's the trick? I think a lot of the trick has to do too is like having a really good sample, just like making sure you're picking good quality samples. If not, it's the glue. I think you have a glue compressor on there too, right?
I think I have a glue compressor, but that's more to like actually cut the volume down more than it is to turn it up, to be honest with you. It's at -9. Let your kick breathe. Like there's not less is more. Like just try the volume. Try playing with this volume here on the right and turn it down to -8 or -9. And don't even, use EQ8 and sculpt your track around just volume at first with your baseline and see what you can accomplish maybe with just EQing and a little bit of compression through glue compressor or the native compressor in Ableton. Don't maybe stay away from saturator. Saturator I know is a lot of people's ways to make it louder, or the limiter. A lot of people usually like to throw a limiter on there and then crank that up to make their track louder. When in reality, having less of those is gonna really give your sounds more dynamic range. Take a look at your waveform. These waveform stabs right here are at 0. They're kind of quiet right now. I've used multiple things to turn these up, but in reality, you could probably just go in here and increase the size of the waveform to maybe +3 dB. Small like things like that, instead of just throwing a bunch of effects on it, I think will go a long way. I don't usually layer kicks just because of distortion. I usually use EQ for changing kick frequency. So in the beginning right here, I like to cut that out as like an intro. So all that is that's just dragging that EQ8 low end, and that was 115 hertz. So if you look, that's cut off there at 115 before it goes into 30 hertz. The bass line's also cut off at 30 hertz as well. I think the kick.
So times that you would lay your kick is if like you have a low thumpy kick and you need like the snappiness for it. So you add like
you're doing
like a click or like a click on your kick. Or you know what I mean, but like it all comes down to finding samples that sound good enough, because most of them are already going to be like mastered well, are great sounding. And then you just do those little tricks to make it sound better. But boom. So I literally just drag and Finder, and it's on the and you can see like what you could do too is like go up to the top. If you right click, you can do add locator, and you can be like break. Boom. Like this is the whole track and sound editing. This is a drop. Right. And then if you want to get even crazier, if you could be like add, you can be like add hi-hat or shaker or what is crazy sound, whatever. And you can do that. And then you already have like your structured out track. And then, just try to make it sound your own pretty much. I'll show you this remix I did and some of the things I did in the tracks.
Let's get it. Into it. Let's get it. Into it. Let's get it. Into it. Let's get it. Let's get intimate. Let's get it.
All right. So same thing that Mitch is doing, just automation on the end of the bass lines. And because the bass line is pretty much the same all the way throughout the track, to do things that make it different and kind of move throughout the song. So, every, I think 16.
You want to show how you're automating that again real quick? Like what button you might be pressing? Like a quick reminder.
It literally just shows up. And then same thing that he's doing, the frequency, just. And the reason why you do that is so when it drops in, it comes in like heavier. If you do that for your break, if like I do that here, we're talking about structure. That's why I opened up. So 16, and then I bring in the bass. Another 16, then I have a little, and then I drop it back in to 32. It's about 32. And that's usually what, how people do their things. And then I went a little different. I did a break, but instead of having to drop right after 16 bars, I have it go off the grid. So this is what it kind of sounds like, just to make everything different. So it's not kind of the same as everything else.
Into it. Let's get it.
So what was that little sound right there in the break?
What sound?
That little UFO sound.
That's like a pad. This is this thing right here.
Cool.
Reverb. And then so like what I do too is like I have send and return tracks. And so this is gonna help you out. This is a little more advanced. I'm not gonna go too crazy into it, but like you can set up return tracks and you have your reverb and you have your delay. I even have this is a third-party plugin by FabFilter compressor, which I use to parallel compress my drums. I'm not gonna get into that today because it's still a little much, but pretty much it's gonna help you glue all your drums together, make them pop out and sound out like more. And this is going to be better. It's not going to make your tracks as muddy as just throwing your effects on just the actual track. And it's easier to automate this way as well.
Sus, do you want to show real quick, now that I just thought about it, do you want to show how if you take a sound and you take a sample, if you drag it into a track, how can you set 1-1 and sculpt the track and recut it up and sample it or reverse it? You know what I mean? Kind of like
a sample.
Yeah, like how can you like like how do you resample? Because I think a lot of the times people like hear these sounds, right? And everybody's seeing us like play these tracks, but like how did we cut up some of these samples? What would that look like? Or what different tools does Ableton have in order to maybe shape those sounds?
Yeah. All right, let me open this other file. We can do that real quick.
I think that'd be kind of cool. And like maybe just take like a synth or some shit and show how you can.
All right, so this bad boy. All right, so let's open up something. So my samples are, organized the same thing. I have acapellas, bass house, disco effects, hip hop, house minimal, yada yada yada. Try to do that everything. It just helps with finding shit. So if I want like a bongo in there, you literally just drag it in, drop it. You can go in if you want to
talk about. Do you want to talk about like warp too?
Yeah. So say this was off. You could go here. If you right click, you can set the start point from right there. So you just set 1.1 here, and it's gonna start from there now.
So that's changing the start position of the sample.
That's changing the start position of the actual sample. You can go crazier. There's this double arrow thing right here. It's gonna bring up your envelopes, and say you don't want you can go in and you can cut everything out. Like if you don't want that there, you can cut that out.
That's how I do it.
I suggest doing this because you don't want to use the whole loop because it's kind of cheating, but a lot of people do it. Or you can go to envelopes and you can grab the volume automation and select the area that you don't want to be playing. You just go around, and like if you don't want to cut anything, you don't feel comfortable, you can literally just experiment. Now it's getting different. There's one way you can do stuff. Let's talk about if you wanted to cut something and reverse it. You have reverse right here. You hit it, it does exactly what it says. Sounds kind of weird. You usually do that for effects or crashes, so you can make like a swooping noise. A couple of things you can throw on a sample to make it a little choppy, make it different. If you go to audio effects, there is the gate. Make a loop real quick. Pretty much just selecting the area that it's gonna allow to be played.
So if you have like a sound that's ringing out too long, or if you have something that has like a tail to it that you want it to be more snappy, the gate will help you with that tremendously.
Also, what you can do too is like, say you want to throw it on, let's throw a gate on a shaker, right? So here's a shaker.
Turn the shaker off first, or turn the gate off first. What does it sound like?
All right, turn on the gate. you can use this, and if you want it to be in the beginning to be really short, you can have it like that, and then you can automate it on the second half and have it open.
Other way, no?
Yeah, that way, sorry. Just to give him, just to make him dance a little different, you know. So like, if you do it live, this sound like it's more live. This is more cut and more like refined, and then that one open up. So you can do that at the beginning of it, and then at 17, you can have it where your all yours open up. It just makes it feel more real and less like computerized, if that makes sense. You guys have any questions?
Does anybody have any questions? Anything you guys want to see? Anything you guys want to check out? We're just not trying to dive in too crazy. I was gonna say too, if you guys are having a hard time like figuring out where to start in a track, or like figuring out where to start when it comes to producing or getting a feel, a lot of the times, like, if you're listening to a track and you listen to songs and where stuff comes in at what timestamps or how many, count along to tracks, and then see where you would bring that in on your track. You can kind of tell those 8-bar, 16-bar change up and those differences where you would have stuff change, or different parts and elements of the track come in or fade away or progress. You can play that role if you get up and dance around in the freaking living room while you're making that track too, man. I mean, that'll help out a lot.
Here's something else, more arrangement, but this is techno. So I have more MIDI than I would normally, just because like ARPs and bass lines and stuff. Have a listen.
MIDI asks if you always start your songs with drums. MIDI asked if you always start your song with drums.
So it's different, but like I usually start my song with drums just because I work better that way. So I start with my kick. I try to leave my clap out for as long as I can, because I feel like if you make a beat without a clap and you add the clap in, it's gonna be amazing. So I start with my kick, my hi-hats, my percussions. I try to make a rhythm, a 16-bar loop, a rhythm, something that you can dance to. And once I got that, then I add my bass. And then my bass after that comes like synthesizers or like anything high, and then I start with vocals.
I usually like to design sounds or test out sounds that I think sound cool, and then maybe build the track around that. But as far as if I start the beginning of the track with drums every time instead of just sound, yes, because it's DJ, like fucking DJ friendly. I mean, like that's the kind of music that I play. That's the kind of music that I produce. I'm pretty sure if you,
that's how I usually start a track. But like, every track doesn't start with drums. Like I try to switch it up. So like I'll make the beat first with my drums, but then when I structure it down, I'll start with like a pad with like a small little hi-hat that's being EQ'd up, so it's like very, very soft, and then you bring your kick in at 17 or 8 or whatever. Not every track needs to start with drums, but making my tracks, I start with the drums first.
Angel Mendoza said the main thing for me is mixing down, getting a good balance. Mixdown is totally, I think,
mixdown is 100% the most important thing, because if you're not mixing down correctly, it's not going to sound good on the master.
If you guys don't know what we mean by mixdown, pretty much mixdown is where does all of your sounds and all of your instruments and everything that you've added to your track, where does it sit in the mix? So when you're finally done putting all the drums together and everything and all your automation, all your sounds and effects and blah, 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 and you're ready to master it or whatever, how does it sound before you master it? but after you're done creating. The mix down is super important too, because a lot of the times the mastering process, I've seen tracks mastered in 15 minutes to 30 minutes if the mix down's done correctly. But a lot of the times too with the mix down, what you're pretty much looking for is your sound stage. So the way I like to describe a mix down is, if you go to a show or if you go to a concert or if you go to a performance or a club, and if you close your eyes, where do you see all those instruments on stage, or does each sound have its own place in the track? So a really good mix down allows every single instrument and sound that you've added to your track to give its own place in the mix itself.
And then Cathal O'Connor makes a very good point. You can put a span analyzer on the master to reference volumes of frequencies, compare it to reference track, and try to get a similar waveform throughout the track. So what you can do is you get an analyzer and you see where the frequencies are hitting on that reference track, and then you try to emulate that on your own track. It's kind of like coloring in the lines, you know.
Shauna asked, how long does it take to finish a track, rough draft on average? I did that Codes remix for Holy Moly in 2 hours on my couch, and I've done originals, and it's taken me like 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Sam White, I do tune my kick drum samples. You can do that by using, there's a bunch of different third party plugins you can use, but I just use Tuner. It's not the most reliable, but it usually can get most samples in there. As you can see on this track, I did tune. I have it says F, so it was already an F. You can do that by transposing up or down. Do I use a lot of groove and swing on tracks? So okay, yeah. So also too with velocities. All right, so I'll show you guys a couple tricks when it comes to that stuff. Where's my hats at? I think I already saw it consolidated. Okay, so for example, for Robert, for my hats, when I'm drawing them in, you can change the velocity in MIDI when you're adding the note. I'll show you how to do that. Or when you're cutting MIDI, as you can see here on Close Hat 101, this is smaller than this one. So to begin with, this shot, I added the shot there so it can be double. Is that like little? Right. So a little trick is if you lower the first one down a little bit, it's like when you play drums, not every hit on the drum is going to be exactly the same velocity. That's not real. So if you do this, it's going to give it a little bit of a swing instead of it being directly on like dot dot. That's velocity pretty much. You can do in MIDI. All right, so a double click here. This is the velocity of MIDI, down and up 100. So you can change your MIDI shots if you're doing hats that way. You can also do swing, which this is a little much, but you can go to groove over here. And the cool thing about Ableton is when you hit the recycle sign, you go to swing, and it already has like these little swing that you can add in there. If you're in house, I might recommend staying in 16 notes. That's what these are. These are 8 notes, 16th, 32. And pretty much when you add them in, for techno, you don't really want to do that. You maybe a little bit. With house, you absolutely want swing in everything. Like add it in your, maybe not your kick, but like your clap, your hi-hats, your percussions, so you can add swing to everything. And it would just kind of make it less robotic and make it feel more natural and give it that swing.
There's a question in here too. Any tips on stereo widening? Use the auto pan and utility widening. I don't understand the 400% full width. Also, sometimes tracks sound louder when you make them wider, but then on other devices, when you play back, it doesn't sound as loud.
Yeah, so that's called big mono. And so what you're doing is when you're trying to make your stuff stereo and you supposed to pan things, and a lot of the things too is like people will add the same effects on channels to make them louder, and that's going to make it muddy and kind of you're going to have phase issues. So I highly suggest when you with hats and stuff, like I haven't done it to this track yet, but you know, pan one drum to the left, pan one hi-hat to the right, make things not all in the center, and that what's going to help you out by making your track a little more stereo sounding.
I have a pretty strict rule on hi-hats. I just don't use any, like, no, I don't usually use any hi-hat at the same time. Like, I never layer a closed hi-hat and an open hi-hat on the same note at the same time. One, I grew up playing drums. I never did that. That's not a thing. Two, it just doesn't sound good. I mean, like, realistically, your drums are going to really only need, like what does a drum set have? What is that composed of? And then maybe a couple percussion instruments. That's really all you guys need. And also what you would play at the same time.
So I have mine doubled up. What Mitch is saying though is like if he would take out the highs because the closed because the highs are there. The only reason why I'm using these ones is because the frequency of these smaller hats are lower than the ones that are higher. So I think it's a little okay because they sit at different frequencies. But if the hats are in the same frequency and you're having a high and close, you're definitely gonna want to have one in and one out. Like just switch them off.
Secret time savers, more shortcuts. Shortcuts are definitely gonna be. We use Ozone and mainly FabFilter for mastering Angel. If you're using stock plugins for mastering, you would be looking at EQ8, loop compressor,
Yeah, limiter,
and multi-band
saturation, maybe.
Saturation. Yeah. I would say worry more about definitely your mix sound first before you throw anything on that master. If you're gonna throw anything on your master in Ableton, just put the limiter on it. That's the only thing I would really suggest putting on there, and maybe EQ8, but that's about it.
Also, too, for mix down, make sure you guys are EQing as you go. And it may seem like a pain, like getting in your workflow, but like I will save you time and effort in the long run. So what I mean by EQ as you go, you add a kick in your audio or your MIDI, and right away you throw an EQ8 on there. When you add a clap track, we right away add EQ8 and you adjust it so that way everything is going to be sounding the best it possibly can instead of going back and then adding all that stuff at the end.
So this is kind of like a pretty tech housey kind of track. I just want to open this up so you guys can see this. This is kind of like pretty groovy, pretty dirty birdy. Couple things I'll like point out here. So, and we'll go back. So shortcuts, I mean, hotkeys all day. So like if you see I keep toggling between this like red lines off and on, that's me just pressing A over and over on automation. Command T to opening up audio tracks. I mean, hotkeys are going to be where it's at. For
They do sell a Ableton like keyboard cover that has all the shortcuts on it. If you have a couple bucks to spend, it's definitely worth buying.
And a lot of the times too, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to consolidate. So like if I put this drum loop together, I'm going to highlight this 4-bar section, Command J consolidate, turn loop on, and then drag that out. Like I'm not going to sit there and just go in depth and keep stuff like this here a lot of the time.
It's also for organization too, because like if you have a bunch of cut ups like that, it's going to get a little hectic.
That's pretty basic bass. That thing's just cut up. That's like 4-bar semi cut up, and it's pretty. You can see where I cut it up originally here, and then I just consolidated it here. But it's just a couple different bass stabs, reversed. You'd hear the reverse right here in this part. So that's where we just double click, turn reverse on. What else do we have? We have the vocal shots here as well. So these vocal loops, and I think I have it. Any tips for making vocals pop out EQ8 plugins?
But we should show them functionality before we end too.
You have that on yours, right?
Yeah, because there's a lot of like vocal shots that you did on there that are pretty cool.
Yeah, this shit's just all these vocals here. This is just vocal chopping. I mean, I just chopped these up and gave the space in between because it's more so just for rhythm in the background. And then I think there's some like automation in here. I don't think there's any kind of transpose automation. No. I don't know where I had transpose automation. Do you want to show them that? Do you want to show them that real quick? Do you want to show them functionality then for the vocal work? The vocals are definitely sidechained for sure. I have them sidechained and I have kickstart on there as well. So that's why they sound like they're like ducking.